watched him and I've read him for so long as a cultural commentator, and I think that's true for an entire generation of people who have read Fasi Zaka and Nadeem Farooq Paracha, whose own understanding of our past and our cultural production has been intimately kind of tied to our politics. And I think that these two cultural commentators have really enabled us to read our cultural production in conjunction with the larger politics of the country, which is tied to larger global politics. So again, I'm taking this moment to extend my thank you to Fasi for having done this work for so long, and I'm sure writing is such a thankless work anyway, but grateful to you, and I'm using this moment to acknowledge it. I'm going to read Fasi's official bio, which is Fasi Zaka is a public policy professional who works in governance and behavioral change communications. He is well known additionally as a satirist, a TV and a radio host, and he's had a weekly op-ed column in the News and the Express Tribune. He's written extensively for the Friday Times and other publications. He's a Rhodes Scholar and WEF Young Global Leader. His most recent written contribution has been his book, Letters to Palestine, an anthology called Koi Hai, Letter to Palestine, published by Zuka Books. For the other speaker, our main speaker for the evening, Eddin Khoo, I don't have anything written. I'm just going to ad-lib it. Eddin is someone I'm fortunate to call my friend. I met Eddin 6 years ago in Penang on a translation symposium, and ever since we have been in touch. I have been reading Eddin's work, and I'm a tremendous admirer of Eddin as a thinker, as an individual, and the ethos of cosmopolitanism that he espouses in his work and he practices. For me personally, I think Eddin is a kind of an intellectual from the global south that serves as a model for all of us. People who are, trying to think about difficult problems. He is deeply rooted in the communities he works with. His most significant work that he's known for is an institution called Pusaka that works with, as he describes it, ritual communities, is that correct? And ritual performers in Malaysia, which is to say, shamans, healers, indigenous dancers, performers, and he's been working very, very closely with all of them since the last 33 years. And trying to preserve is not the right word, but trying to help them, trying to help sustain those communities on their own terms, helping them find and make space within their own community spaces to consolidate their work and to pass on these performative traditions that have a really important function in maintaining the cultural biodiversity of our world. So that is Eddin's major work. Eddin, aside from that, obviously, Eddin is also a journalist. He also holds the distinction of having interviewed 3 of Pakistan's two prime ministers, 1 president, Musharraf. He's interviewed Benazir as well as Nawaz Sharif earlier. So he's a very active political journalist along with his engagements, and he's also a fantastic writer and a fantastic poet. I'm sure you will get to hear the force of Eddin's prose this afternoon, and you will get a glimpse of his intellect as well. And finally, he also has a publishing house through which he engages with global literature and translates them into Malay. So again, I don't know how he's managed to pack all of this in these few years that he's a young man still. Of 55, he told me. So I don't know how he's managed it, but however you have done it, thank you for being here, and thank you, Fasi, for agreeing to hold this conversation. Can I ask you guys to come on stage? Thank you. Please give them a round of applause.
Thank you.
So thank you everyone for coming here, and Bilal, thank you so much. Truly heartwarming introduction. I'm sure Eddin deserves it. I didn't, but very happy to hear that. Thank you everyone for coming as well. I heard you've come of your own free will. No one's been forced from college to be here, so thank you. I didn't know people loved boxing this much in this country. So before, when we were sitting, me and Eddin were talking, that's a lot of people for a boxing match that happened 50 years ago. And I'm glad that Bilal gave such a great introduction of Eddin. I do want to add is that, Eddin, you deserve to be interviewed by one of the top sports writers in the countries. Unfortunately, Indus Conclave could not get one. So I'm here to do it, and I suspect that I was invited partly because 15 years ago, I started writing on my Twitter bio, former Pakistan hockey team captain. And since then, whenever I write something, occasionally, because now newsrooms have less journalists and their struggle, so I'm quoted in the press as the former Pakistan hockey team captain. And 2-3 times I've been invited to sports events, partly because people think I was a hockey team captain. And so I'm sure the Punjab group of colleges did a better search than that, but I suspect that's one of the reasons I'm here today. But anyhow, so I wanted to start and ask you is that, you know, you're this man of letters, you're a Renaissance man. Why are you obsessed by this fight of two men almost killing each other 50 years ago?
Thank you. Thank you so much to the Punjab group, to the Indus Conclave, to my lovely brother Bilal for that wonderful introduction, to Fasi, and to all of you all for turning up. That's an interesting question. I was a weenie child. I was very thin and wild. And my nickname, my pet name as I was growing up was Mowgli, the jungle boy, because I refused to wear clothes. And I used to run around the gardens. But I think Muhammad Ali captures a particular time of my growing up. And I always wanted to be a boxer, which was quite impossible when I was a child, or even as I was growing up, because I would have to be placed under the flyweight or mosquito weight category. Not an ego trip at all to be called one of those things. Even a lightweight would have been better. But I took up boxing later in life. I ended up playing a lot of football, and Maradona was my hero. And I played a lot of hockey, field hockey, in which two Pakistanis were my heroes, Samiullah and Kalimullah Khan. But I grew into boxing. I think over the years, I have come to love great writers. I keep them very close to my heart, and they guide a lot of what how I think and how I navigate the world. But my heroes are men of the body, or people of the body actually, namely Muhammad Ali and Bruce Lee. Actually, one of the things that has greatly inspired me is the tension that exists between the body and the intellect. And I'm going to bring up a name here that some of you might know. He's one of the great writers that I hold on to, whose feet I hold on to actually. His name is Yukio Mishima. He's a Japanese writer. And Mishima tried to constantly negotiate this contradiction between the body and the written word, beautifully encapsulated in a book called Sun and Steel. He, of course, came to a tragic end. He was quite mad, kind of madness that I aspire to also, a lyrical madness. But I think my love for Muhammad Ali and this fight has a lot more to do than boxing, the sport. It's about the politics of the times. If you go to YouTube and you key in Billy Crystal, Muhammad Ali funeral, you will find a really lovely speech that he gave at the funeral of Muhammad Ali. And one of the phrases that really caught me was, he says, we have lots of images and visuals of Muhammad Ali, but to live in his time is something else entirely. And I was fortunate enough to do that. I lived in his time. I grew up in his time. I met him when I was 5 years old, when he came to fight Joe Bugner in Kuala Lumpur. I was in kindergarten. Can I tell this story?
Yes, please.
I was in kindergarten, and we were kind of bisected. Certain group to meet Joe Bugner. Who the hell was he? Who cared, really? And then another one to meet Muhammad Ali. And I was put in the Joe Bugner group.
Yeah.
And I think for maybe the first and not the last time, but I really wept. I cried. And I owe a great debt to my teacher, whose name is Mrs. Selva Raja, in case I can show her this recording. But she actually carried me and brought me to Ali. And he put his hand on my head, and he said, these hands can pick up a watermelon, and your head is smaller than a watermelon. I should get that tattooed on my body one of these days. But that essentially was the climate. He was very big in Malaysia.
Yeah.
He was the most famous man in the world. He flirted with dictators, even as he was a man of the people. He globalized boxing and essentially brought a sense of a public figure to what it was today. And of course, he was a rebel.
So, I mean, for a lot of people here who may not have, they have an idea of who Muhammad Ali was. He was a great boxer. Can you give us an idea so that everyone knows the context? So this was a series of 3 fights that had gone on. Muhammad Ali won 1, Frasier won 1. Why was it so important, and what did Muhammad Ali represent at that particular time? He had a position on the American war in Vietnam. He had suffered because of that. He had a representation of a sport where, you know, at least in the past, white men had dominated. He had taken on, and he had taken on this superhuman hero persona, where he meant a lot of things for a lot of people. He meant one thing for the developing world, he meant one thing to Muslims, he meant another thing to Americans. So if you could just give some background just prior to the fight and why this fight was so anticipated.
Yeah, it's Muhammad Ali. Let's talk a bit about him and what he represented. He was an 18-year-old. And whenever we talk about the Thrilla of Manila, we tend to forget the other protagonist in the fight, who is Joe Frasier. And they really represented 2 very different streams of basically the same experience, which was the Negro experience. I still use that term, the Negro experience, in the United States. And of course, the universalization of the American experience around the world. The title, Punching Down the Walls of the City, doesn't come from Muhammad Ali. It comes from the person who was allegedly the dumb one, which was Joe Frasier. And after the fight, Joe Frasier basically said, I threw punches that would bring down the walls of a city, and he still stood standing. He's a great champion. The incredible meter of that showed a man who had tremendous intelligence, but who couldn't kind of keep up with the celebrity, the braggadocio of Muhammad Ali. Ali, of course, started out as an 18-year-old, winning the Olympics. And when he returned home, he was not allowed to sit in a cafeteria and cafe with white people. And out of rage, he threw his medal into the river. He then beat Sonny Liston, when boxing was a completely different experience. It was essentially run by the mafia, and it was a betting sport, and largely fixed, kind of like what world entertainment wrestling is today. But he came on the scene without having a chance, really, because Sonny Liston was a brute. he came close to killing people in the ring. And Ali came in there full-mouthed, you know. And he started to taunt Sonny Liston, and he started to try and bully Sonny Liston and psycho-warfare. In fact, the wife of the champion, one of the great boxing champions whose name was Joe Louis, right, the brown bomber, when she first saw Ali, she said, that boy is crazy. And everyone expected Liston to kill him in the first few rounds. But Ali developed a whole different style, the dancing style, the butterfly. And of course, he gave a lot of credence and he gave a lot of meaning to essentially one of the great poetic forms in the world, boxing terminology. He danced around and he eventually beat this beast and announced himself to be king of the world. He then did a very made a very audacious political act and joined this strange esoteric group called the Nation of Islam. He started to take very strong principled positions on the civil rights movement, on the side of the militant side of the civil rights movement, very opposed to the Martin Luther King approach. And then eventually, as you know, he was drafted into the US Army. And when his name was called, they didn't say Muhammad Ali, they said Cassius Clay. And he refused to stand up. And he refused to be drafted. And he was banned from boxing for about 6 years when he was at the peak of his career. And one of the amazing things, of course, was he came back at an age of near retirement and achieved his greatest triumphs, including fighting with Frasier, beating the other beast, George Foreman. But I think the politics that he brought, and he globalized the sport, of course. So it was no longer in Las Vegas and various stadiums around the United States. He took his fights to Zaire, and he took his fights to Kuala Lumpur, and he took his fights to Manila. And over there, of course, won the affection and the deep love of people all around the world. It is said, I think it's apocryphal, but apparently there's a place in China that doesn't know what boxing is, but who knows who Muhammad Ali is. So I think that career, the universalization, the globalization of Muhammad Ali as a figure of resistance, particularly at a time of, now we use the word global south, a term I'm not so very fond of. I grew up in the age of the third world, and we spoke of the third world in very, very elevated terms when we gathered in Bandung 70 years ago to think of an alternative world. We didn't say the South, we said the third world. And I think Ali carried that third world spirit very much. He also flirted with dictators, which is a very interesting insight into the politics of that time, because dictators for us today were not dictators for us then. It was a very interesting period of populism in politics in many countries. And of course, for us in Southeast Asia, his stance against the Vietnam War was especially poignant and resonant.
That's brilliant. I have a few follow-up questions, but I just want to get an idea. How many people in the audience have seen the recent film F1 with Brad Pitt, for example? Okay, so not that many, but if you've seen this movie, it's surprising at how what seems simple at the surface is extremely technical. It's a sport where it looks like people are just trying to drive cars from A to B as fast as possible, but they're actually using a lot of strategy, a lot of, really technical things. So the same question I have is, how many of you have ever done a little bit of boxing? Raise your hands. Okay, so very few people. So, I mean, I did boxing only once in my youth, and I lasted for 3 minutes. or "Bahut sakht dhulai hui thi meri," and it's surprising at how exerting it is. You can't tell unless you actually do it. That it's probably one of the most intense sports there is. And at the same time, it's also incredibly technical, where people have these strategies. And I believe in the second round not the second round, but in the second match that they had, Ali was using a technique of trying to get his neck in place and in the third one, he was using the ropes. But before we get into that, I have just one question that I want you to address. So for everyone, you had Muhammad Ali, you had a massive nation like the US, you had the history of racism, you had an imperial outreach going on, which he objected to. At the same time, you had nascent nationalism in the countries that he was going to, who happened to be dictators. Now, in this huge telling, is it sometimes inconvenient that Joe Frazier was also a black man? That this huge victory against all that, like, what does Joe Frazier represent?
Yeah, there's a great paradox, and it's very interesting. Let me clarify a little about what I'm actually doing with this.
Yes.
I'm writing a big essay to commemorate 50 years of the Thrilla in Manila, which took place on October 1st, 1975. And I'm hoping that that large essay, 5,000, 10,000 words, will translate into a book that really seizes the politics and spirit of that time as encapsulated by Muhammad Ali. But I do not forget Joe Frazier at all, because there was an amazing contradiction. So if you look at Ali's greatest foes, you look at Sonny Liston, who really represented an establishment, boxing establishment. He was a boxing establishment figure. If you look at George Foreman, George Foreman was essentially a big monster who knocked out his opponents in 1 or 2 rounds, including Joe Frazier. So Joe Frazier was world champion, and he got it because Ali was banned from boxing. So Frazier never ever felt that he was the real legitimate champion, because really it was Ali's belt, right? So he waited, he petitioned for Ali to be released. He helped Muhammad Ali with money and financial aid. And then when the fight was actually scheduled, he became the butt of all his abuse and his poetry.
Yeah.
Remember the famous phrase, it's going to be a thriller and a killer and a chiller when I get the gorilla in Manila. Yeah? Yeah. But he was full of this. I mean, and he got this from entertainment wrestling to essentially psych your opponent out. He called Sonny Liston. He was asked, why do you think you should be the champion? And Ali's response was, Sonny Liston's too ugly to be world champion. He called George Foreman the mummy, and he would go at it, yeah? He would create entire kind of drama around this stuff. With Frazier, it was very, very personal. Now, look at Joe Frazier. He was a sharecropper's son from South Carolina. He essentially worked on a plantation. And then he escaped and went to Philadelphia, and he was taken in by a famous boxing coach. The interesting thing about Joe Frazier was that he actually lived the black experience of slavery. Ali grew into it with the Olympic incident. Right? He was otherwise a pretty middle-class black American child. His father painted images of Jesus Christ for churches. They led a pretty, lower middle-class life. And the shock of racism came to him later in life. With Frazier, it was already encapsulated and lived. But Frazier didn't see the sport, essentially, as a place for politics. He saw the sport as a place for his own social mobility and social upliftment. So he was very baffled by what Ali was trying to do. But Ali was very clever because he didn't turn the world against Frazier, but he turned his crowd against Frazier. And his crowd, of course, was very vociferous and very persuasive. At this time, Muhammad Ali was not popular. To be an American, even with many black Americans, to be an American, to dodge the draft, they dodge the draft. It was actually an act of civil disobedience, but they described it as dodge the draft, was very, very unpopular. So he was really kind of loathed in the United States, even as he gained a great following in the rest of the world. So the contrasting figures, I think, make this particular contention between the two especially important, because it has great historical resonances. There's a lot of drama. There's a lot of theater. And somehow, the guy who actually lived the experience comes out really badly and is forgotten.
So, I mean, I find that fascinating. And I'm just going to pose a question to you. And in some ways, I also see how this is so resonant even today. So with Joe Frasier, the guy who was actually a slave, who had to escape, the guy who had the kind of life that Ali talked about but hadn't lived. And now, in our popular imagination, Joe Frasier has been reduced to a boxing opponent. Do you think that that was essential for this legend to grow of Muhammad Ali?
Yes, very much so. And I think Ali very much knew that. And so he essentially engineered his entire personality. Yeah. He was, of course, the most beautiful athlete ever. And this was his own words, of course. He needed to cultivate that, but his sense of his politics was spot on. It was not pretentious, but there are many commentators, especially black commentators, critical commentators, who really see him as a pawn of this thing called the Nation of Islam and militant black activism, something that he left behind. It's very interesting. He, of course, joined the Nation Islam because Malcolm X persuaded him to do so. When Malcolm X left the Nation of Islam and became Malik al-Shabazz, essentially the cosmopolitan and worldly Muslim, Ali rejected him. In the second phase of Muhammad Ali's life, the Parkinsonian phase, he took that route too. A peacemaker, a kind of diplomat who was, saving hostages from Saddam Hussein's Iraq and doing things like that, lighting the Olympic torch in 1984, trembling and shaking. So interesting parallels with lots of people who were with him. But in the 60s and 70s, he was something else entirely. So a very quick question. In terms of Muhammad Ali taking this particular route, right? He wins the Olympic gold, throws the gold medal in the river because he's not treated equally. He's good enough to win honor for his country, but not good enough to sit at the same table with a white man. So he throws it. And subsequently, he was very in your face because there was always this politics between, do we keep our heads down and get less oppressed? Or do we go all out in demand? And this is something is mimicking itself as a choice today also. You see what's happening in America. Yeah. We have minorities in Pakistan also. Sometimes we say, better to keep your head down because mobs, because of other things. So in terms of like your understanding, and you've been around the world, you've been doing all this cultural work, is what Muhammad Ali did supremely important, or is it the quiet work that also happens concurrently? I don't think you can distinguish them. In all my years studying very deeply and reading the literature of the civil rights movement, I think it is one of the most lyrical, one of the most historically profound movements that has ever existed. In terms of literature, in terms of tactics and strategy, and in terms of personality. I think a lot of our movements today lack that. We lack a James Baldwin. We lack a Muhammad Ali, and Muhammad Ali was dyslexic, right? He couldn't read. And when he went for his military test, they described him as a cretin. Right. This man who had this wonderful mouth. And he had this incredible relationship with a sports commentator by the name of Howard Cosell. And Howard Cosell interviewed him once and said, why are you so truculent? And he said, I don't know what that word means, but if it's good, then I'm that. And he used to keep the company of intellectuals, serious intellectuals, who really worshipped him. Many intellectuals who had macho syndrome, for example. Norman Mailer, George Plimpton, David Remnick, who met him later. But they all worshipped this man because of his sense of assuredness, his sense of poetry, and his sense of the body, right? So I don't think you can actually distinguish one from the other. I think Ali is an evolution, just as the world evolved. But you cannot never anticipate, you cannot underestimate, I think, what he really meant to people. You know, one of the great things about the three fights, one of the things that really drew me into the world and experience of Ali was the fact that he, of course, he brought his person and his boxing to the world. But in the first fight, called the Fight of the Century, he had just come out of retirement, he had just come out of being banned, and Frasier was pumped up because he needed to prove to the world that he could defeat this man, which he did, with a beautiful left hook in the 15th round. Yeah. When that had took place, there was an old religious teacher, not even very old, I think he was in his 50s, in a northern state of Malaysia called Kedah. When Frasier landed that left hook, he said, Ali tumpas, which is Ali has fallen, got a heart attack and died. So that was the main front page news the next day, that this religious teacher had died following Ali's fall. These trilogy of fights, this troikas really, this triptych, really saw, I think, boxing as a movement. And then once you got to the fights, as you mentioned, Fasi, you looked at how incredibly intense boxing actually is. And I'm very interested in that sport because I'm very interested in primordiality. A lot of the work that I do with shamans and healers and shadow puppeteers within a ritual context, not performative, yeah, ritual context, is about touching and being close to the primordial in you. Yeah. To emotions, to the subconscious. And I think all that drama, eventually when you go in for the 15 rounds, I don't know how many people box here, we have a boxer on that side. But let me encapsulate it in this. In the Thrilla in Manila, Ali dominates for 5 rounds. Frasier then makes a comeback and dominates for another 5 rounds. And the next 3 rounds, because the fight is stopped, because Frasier has, his right eye has closed. And this was the amazing thing about Joe Frasier. He lost sight in his left eye in 1964. So for all his years as a professional boxer, he fought with one eye. And in the 13th round, Ali had knocked off his mouthpiece, and his eye had swollen to that level. It started to close. So essentially, he was blind. And he wanted to go on, but his manager, Eddie Khoo, said, you know, he'll kill you, and stopped the fight. But in the 3rd round, Ali lands a beautiful cross, right? He lands a beautiful cross, And then he takes what you call in boxing a back step. Cross, back step, cross, and Frasier's shaken, and he takes a back step, and he pauses for maybe half a second. And he has this incredible gaze at Frasier, wondering whether he's going to fall. Now you're talking in milliseconds, yeah. And what is wonderful about the camera these days is that you actually catch this kind of intensity. So once you're in the ring, all the gorilla stuff and all the Cassius Clay stuff goes out, and it essentially is basically ensuring that you have enough water in your body. It's ensuring that you're able to anticipate every single move of the boxer. So as much as Ali was talking about gorilla and whatever not, the number of hours he used to sit and just watch reels of Joe Frazier fighting. Frazier was a very unconventional fighter. He was the kind of fighter that Ali was most frightened of. Ali wasn't frightened of big beasts, you know. He knew how to deal with them, tire them out, like a water hose that is going out drip, drip, drip at the end. And so when he beat George Foreman, he used the rope-a-dope, and he would lie against the rope and allow himself to be hit by these vicious punches, right? So that after the fight, he urinated blood for 10 days. That's how damaged his body was. But by the 8th round, Foreman was totally exhausted. And if you look at, he catches Foreman on the ropes. He does a few clips, actually. And then he clips the jaw. And Foreman, this huge thing, he does his spindle and falls down. And Ali has his fists raised for another punch, which he never throws. And that, of course, has become legend because he was asked, why didn't you throw that punch? And he said, I didn't want to destroy the beauty of the moment. Right? Frasier was different. He used to bob, and he had this amazing hook, and he was always just waiting for the opportunity, that single second when you could land it and just destroy your opponent.
So I just want to ask, I think you've gone through some of this, but you've spoken about, you know, the primordial sense, or, you know, the body and, you know, the intellect, and obviously Muhammad Ali encompassed both. But some of the things you've just said, like, I was stunned to read about the condition of both fighters after the fight. Muhammad Ali had hematomas in both hips. He could not think clearly for 24 hours because, you know, the concussions that he had received. And again, with Frasier, as you said, he was fighting blind. And, you know, they did say that if this goes on a little while longer, you will die. And so in some ways it sounds almost, you know, very exaggerated that it was a fight to the near death, but this was literally that. And even when the fight was stopped, I believe Muhammad Ali fell down and couldn't get up. Like, he was that exhausted. How does that square with your appreciation of this art form, of, you know, the beauty within it, that it also comes at this extraordinary cost to these two athletes? Which, like, for a lot of people, it's theorized that, you know, his subsequent decline was severely caused by his boxing career for Muhammad Ali. I mean, how does that square with you for people who love this sport?
I love the sport. I will defend it. It is a choice. It's a very powerful question. For the fighters, and Muhammad Ali was asked this often, and he said, I wouldn't have changed a thing. Because if I was not a fighter, if boxing didn't bring me out of a small town in Louisville, Kentucky, that's where I'd be. It was the same for Frasier. You know, it was, he would have remained, if not a sharecropper in South Carolina, he would have run a boxing gym or something. It was also the commercialization of sport. Very interesting era, the first era of live telecasts, for example. So the Thrilla in Manila was very fascinating. That stadium was a rubbish stadium, yeah. the Coliseum. And let me venture into a bit of the politics of the Thrilla in Manila. Now, why was it held in Manila? It was held in Manila for the same reason it was held in Kinshasa.
Could you actually, before, tell us the story of Kinshasa, the one you told us, told me in person?
Yeah.
And I love this story.
You can't hear me?
If you could put it actually on the sofa itself.
Right. You've missed out all of what I've said for all this time? I hope not. One of the first boxing matches that was held outside the United States, there was one that was held in Jamaica, Kingston, Jamaica, between George Foreman and Joe Frasier. And remember, Frasier, who could take Ali on for up to 13 rounds, 15 rounds, fell to George Foreman in 1 or 2 rounds, yeah, in most of those fights. So knowing your boxer, and sometimes your style just doesn't work with your opponent. So they decided to have the fight in Kinshasa, Zaire. And there's a very nefarious figure involved in all of this. A man with shocked hair whose name is Don King. Don King was a rogue boxing promoter. Don King is the man who made Mike Tyson a bankrupt. Don King is the man Mike Tyson would like to kill even today. He's dead now. But he decided that one of the best ways to make money was essentially to go hand in glove with dictators around the world who would offer state sponsorship rather than private sponsorship for fights. So Kinshasa was to be the venue for this great fight called the Rumble in the Jungle, where Ali would regain his title, defying all expectations, beating this literally a killer. But Kinshasa had just come out of a coup, and you had a general, Mobutu Sese Seko, who was a very well-known African dictator who essentially plundered his country, and he was best known for wearing a leopard cap. And he had overthrown a very popular third world figure whose name was Patrice Lumumba. And he was trying to legitimize his rule. And he thought one of the best ways to actually legitimize his rule with his people, legitimize his rule with his people, and essentially to bring the attention of the world to Zaire, was to hold this fight. And they poured in millions. And there wasn't just the fight, there was also the concert before that with James Brown and B.B. King, and it was really a big fanfare. And Ali was in Kinshasa for 3 months, I think. But they constructed this stadium, a brand new stadium that was then never used again. And the problem with Kinshasa at that time was that it was crime-ridden. Murders, muggings, thefts, carjackings, and not safe. So none of the press, for example, wanted to go. So Mobutu did this. He ordered his police to arrest, detain every known criminal and every suspected criminal. And there were thousands, literally. And they were placed beneath the stadium. Right? Beneath, in essentially a dungeon beneath the stadium. And every day one of them would be brought out and publicly shot. Every day. And this went on for about 3 weeks, I think. So that all of Kinshasa was terrified. And during the period of the Rumble in the Jungle, Kinshasa was the safest city in the world. Mobutu himself never went for the fight. He was too afraid of assassination. But he was telecast into his home or his palace. And if I'm not mistaken, I think the Rumble in the Jungle was the first live telecast of a boxing match in the world.
If I could just interfere for a second, how is this any different? Which is what I find fascinating about what you've just said. How is this any different from how certain nations will pursue relentlessly the Olympics, FIFA, is whatever domestic issues they have or questionable things, that holding that particular sport gives a sense of legitimacy and achievement. Was this the first example of that actually happening?
Globally, I think yes. The World Cup was always had, but you never had people traveling, traversing the entire world, going from one World Cup to another. But for this fight, it brought people from all over the world. Right. Celebrities, you know. Yeah. Frank Sinatra, for example, traveled to Kinshasa. People like that. So the whole world's attention was in this place. It globalized sport. And a lot of that practice of chasing the World Cup, chasing the Olympics, a lot of it has to do with money, exchange of money, of course, as we can see with FIFA controversies and OIC controversies till today. But it does draw such a global audience these days. Telecasts are also, you know, exorbitant, but people pay. So again, that aspect of the commercialization of sport, high fees, for example, that Ali used to demand, yeah. 6 million for the Thrilla in Manila. And I think Ali was of such a status that he was always paid more than his opponents. So I think Frasier was paid 3 or 4, but Ali was paid 6. For me, it's very, Thrilla in Manila is very special because of the Southeast Asia associations. So let me tell you a bit about what was happening in the Philippines at that time, a country I love, and I've gone back, and every time I've gone back, I do a bit of looking for Ali in Manila. I've met old sports writers, worn-out geezers, you know, really who are just holding on to their livers because they've just drunk that much whiskey all those years. And this time when I'm going back in November to meet the actual referee who refereed this fight. His name was Carlos Sonny Padilla. And Carlos Padilla was a qualified referee, boxing referee. Boxing is big in the Philippines. But at the time that he refereed this match, he was actually a film star in action films.
Really?
Yeah. But he was brought in specially to referee this fight because of his appeal, his you know, screen appeal. He did a good job, I think. Yeah. But this was the kind of celebrity. And the reason for that was, in 1972, President Ferdinand Marcos introduced a state of emergency in the Philippines. It is one of the most brutal, one of the most tortuous experiences of a Southeast Asian nation that went on for about 20 years. He introduced a system of government, and this is wonderful, this phrase, of constitutional authoritarianism is what it was called. He got rid of his, he put his main, I don't know if many of you all know these names, but one of the great things about talking about topics like this are names itself, right? Yeah. And he imprisoned his main political rival, whose name was Ninoy Benigno Aquino, who was later assassinated on the tarmac of Manila Airport. And Manila Airport is today known as the Ninoy Aquino Airport. He was assassinated on the tarmac, and that led to one of the great revolutions in Southeast Asia called the EDSA Revolution that brought about the end of Ferdinand Marcos. But he was also married to this amazing woman, full of flair and full of drama, whose name was Imelda Marcos. And Imelda's, apart from her politics, one of Imelda's obsessions was celebrity. So who better than Muhammad Ali? Yeah. And this was the background for the fight in the Philippines, in Manila. And they weren't nice because the building of the stadium, for example, it meant that a lot of shanty towns were got rid of. Poverty in Manila was not to be seen.
And this was done with military force. So all this kind of cosmetics of Manila, the city, came at great cost to the people. But the people turned out in droves to see Muhammad Ali jog every day. And he spent a lot of time with them. When he came to Kuala Lumpur, he jogged at 4 o'clock in the morning. And crowds would literally pack the streets. And he would go on for about 9 a.m., hugging people and kissing people and taking photographs with them. So, it was very much at the heart of everyone. Even if they had destroyed your house for this man, you were out there to see him. How much he knew of this, how much he was aware of this, he must have been. But I think in spite of, Ali stood for all the right things.
Yeah.
I think.
So I'm going to ask you 2 quick questions, and then we're going to open it up to if there are any questions from the audience. Very quickly, is that Ali, by the time this fight was over, had established himself in the history books as a legend that is still resonated with today. And we're looking at, in boxing today especially, there's a lot of vanity boxing going on, YouTubers, and in a way, one of the things that saddened many people was Tyson taking up a fight with the Logan brothers, losing. And, the question becomes is like, what is that something that affects your legacy? But Muhammad Ali also did a lot of these things. Like, he had become this venerated figure, but he went into some degree of crass commercialism. And then there was another hero arc, which was fighting a disease. What was, why is that not held against Muhammad Ali? And number 2 is that, where is Joe Frazier's post-retirement life?
Yes, poor Frasier is almost completely forgotten. Although a wonderful documentary has been done of him, it's on YouTube, and you all should. There's lots of stuff on YouTube if you want to understand this time. I think Muhammad Ali, sadly, was the pinnacle of sporting life, and then its downslide into commercialization, commodification. He did very stupid things after he fought Frasier. He did a demonstration match with a Japanese wrestler, Oniko, or I can't remember his name. He went into that crazy fight with Leon Spinks, which he lost, and then he was, of course, such a pathetic figure when he fought his sparring partner, Larry Holmes.
Yes.
Yeah, he fought and lost. And then he had another fight with Buster Douglas, which, by that time he was already Parkinson-stricken. But what made Ali what he was, he changed the nature of sport. I also think that has led to the kind of commodification of sport today. I don't watch much boxing. And I think the tragedy of Mike Tyson was the watershed of the boxing experience, but also of a lot of sporting life. A lot of skill has gone. A lot of the artfulness of sport has gone. A lot of people might get a bit upset with me, but I even find that happening in something like football. I don't see the grace and the ballet of Maradona, who could dribble a whole team. I think a lot of it has to do with personality. The next sporting piece I'm going to do after Ali, and this next one has less to do with the politics of things and a lot to do with the grace of sport and the grace of the body, is I want to write an extensive essay on why Maradona was a better footballer than Pele.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
I think.
Yes.
So I'm going to try and focus on this. I don't see this very much in sport anymore.
Yeah.
The gladiator aspect, the primordiality.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ugly boxing. There's a lot of now with the, I don't know what you call it. They put in a ring and they kick and they...
MMA.
MMA, yes. So there's a lot of that stuff. I think what is lost is artfulness.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of celebrity and commercialization.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just old, I'm not sure.
All right, we have a few minutes. If there's any questions, do we have a mic available for the audience? Yes? Okay, so if you can raise your hands if you have a question, and we'll send the mic out to you. And we'll ask people to ask 2-3 questions, and then you can answer them turn by turn. All right. So I'm going to hope आप लोग इंसाफ कर लेंगे, whoever's done first, because I can't really see all the way back. Anybody got a question? Raise your hands. Okay. The first question is the hardest question. Then everyone has questions afterwards. Yes.
Assalamu alaikum and hello everyone. I'm Amara Siddiqui from Faculty of Law, University of Central Punjab. It's not going to be a difficult question, rather I would like to add something, and that can create many questions. I've been always a great admirer of Muhammad Ali. I was constantly listening, and actually I was feeling my heart palpitation going high. And what we admire him for is, that is, wherever I read, I find him that he has really fought against the racial injustice. He was very courageous to fight against injustice, racial discrimination, and it created peace. But now, when we come to this time or the era, and he actually said one of favorite quote which changed my and many of my friends' life. He said that if you take the world or think the world same as you were at the age of 50, and you see it same as you were looking at your life back in 20, so you have wasted your 30 years. This is what I wanted to add to it. It's very courageous, but now as a teacher, when sometimes it comes and we talk about these big things, which are the real, sometimes children still stay demotivated. They say that it's much more like sentiments you're talking. So what could be the best way? I made a context as a teacher. Okay, how could we actually make it get into their hearts? Because we really want that, to fight against that injustice and discrimination which we see all around.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you so very much.
So next, you've got a question? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Rasti. My question is forming in my brain. I think you spotted me out like 10 seconds before I was ready. But it was such a lovely talk, and I think the reason why it was so lovely is because it's rare to stumble into a talk that just spans different facets of life, and when they come together in a delicious mix, it's always just really enriching. So, Eddin, I just wanted to ask you, I mean, your work seems to sprawl many different things. I mean, the fact that you're a journalist, the fact that you're a poet, the fact that you're interested in sport, in geography. So I wanted to ask you, like, at what stage did you realize that you wanted to veer off a path of what a writer ought to write about, or a literary person ought to focus on? And how have you since sustained that for yourself over your career? How do you make sense of these different things muddling into each other?
So can we take a third question and then you answer? Yes. So who's next? Okay, up front right there. I suspect I haven't done much justice in looking all the way back, but let's just see. Yeah.
Hello, good afternoon. So my question is this: what I gathered from this talk, that Ali stands as a figure who was an agent of social change through the medium of sports. But I feel that after 80s, 90s, and barely early 2000s, that is not a phenomenon anymore, because I don't see sports figure who can be agents of change. And really, the major mobilizers of society come from the influencer sector. So is it really relevant? Is sports an agent of change anymore, because I fail to see any stars in this era, in the past decade more so. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we've got 3 excellent points.
Can I just ask the person who asked the last question?
Yeah.
Do you know who Muhammad Ali is?
I've read about him. I saw his impact, what he stood for.
Pakiza film mein bhi tha. Pakiza film mein bhi tha.
I didn't get your point.
Acha, theek hai. That's another Muhammad Ali. Go ahead, yes.
You know, I look at the crowd, wonderful crowd. There are lots of young women. Can I just do a show of hands of how many people actually know who Muhammad Ali is? So the rest don't. We have a serious problem with a sense of history. I think the world's great wound today is a lack of a sense of history. Are there motivational figures in sport? I suppose, but it's a kind of motivation that is shaped and defined by the culture of today, which is very fleeting. You know, very interesting thing about Muhammad Ali, and I don't know if he were alive today, this is the question I would like to ask him. He was a master of the soundbite. Yeah. After he beat Sonny Liston, and he had his next fight with a pretty formidable heavyweight called Floyd Patterson, who, one, refused to call him Muhammad Ali, kept calling him his slave name, Cassius Clay. So with Muhammad Ali, that was the trigger that transformed the game to real intense enmity. If you called him by his slave name, Cassius Clay, that's when, you know, the whole gimmickry died. He had a fight with a boxer called Ernie Terrell. And he could have beat down Ernie Terrell in 4 rounds. He kept beating him for 12 rounds. And every time, because Ernie Terrell would not call him Muhammad Ali, and every time he landed one of those, you know, real heavy punches, whether it was a hook or a cross or an uppercut, he would look at Terrell and say, "What's my name?" But this soundbite was beautiful. He was asked, "Why do you think you can beat, is it second time lucky that you can beat Floyd Patterson?" He said, "Floyd Patterson, if he even dreamed he could whoop me, he'd better wake up and apologize." Okay. There was his... but the thing is, the world exists on sound bites today. On X, on Twitter, the sound bites are not as good. They're not as thought out, and they're not as natural. And it's a lot of abusive language, things like that. Yeah. Amazing for all the ways that Ali could abuse people. He never used abusive language. And he was a dyslexic. Yeah. So I don't know if they motivate in the same way. They motivate with other things, perhaps, in commercial ways. What I find a little scary now is with people like Conor O'Brien.
Yes.
Yeah. They become huge political figures.
Yeah.
Yeah. And surprisingly, they are people of the right.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of noxious stuff out there, which makes it very difficult for young people as the teacher person. How do you motivate the young? I've done lecturing for decades. I love it. But I find students more and more difficult to engage. And I think the problem lies in attention spans. I think every young person is still very interested in a story. And they can get very drawn to a story. But they do so for the beginning and the end of the class. And then they got to move on to something else, right? So I think there's very little time in this world of fast information. And I think one of the very difficult things for young people today is to distinguish between knowledge and information. It's been conflated and become one and the same thing. Right? As for the last question, I don't know if I can get quite personal.
Go ahead, please.
I'm a mixed child. My father is Chinese. My mother is Indian. And I'm born in a country which is just marginally a Malay majority. It is a Muslim country, but my father's a Buddhist. My mother's a Hindu. I grew up a very isolated child because in ethnically conscious Malaysia, where mixed marriages were quite rare in my time, I was isolated and I kept to myself a lot because I had very little friends, few friends to share things with. I told you I was a weenie child, and so I was bullied a great deal when I was a small child. But when I went to secondary school, something incredible happened. I got into a fight one day, and I realized that I'd learned a lot more from Muhammad Ali than I thought I did. And I also realized that I didn't feel any pain. Yeah. So I got into my first real fight. And very thin, but I had a lot of spirit, maybe, what the Chinese call qi, inner energy. And I was able to land a punch on the chest of this guy who literally flew across the classroom. And so I entered my teenage years, 13, 14, becoming very violent. Okay. So I was a very violent child, and I was expelled from my school when I was 15, and I was sent to what you would call a reform school, except it was a reform school for, people who are more middle class, and you paid a fee to become better. What changed me in the end was forging relationships with women. I grew up with a lot of women. My mother, my aunts, my cousins, large extended family I have, typical Jaffna Tamil family. It's like you have about 35 close people. All of them were women. And then I was sent to a boys' school where I was bullied. And then entered a boys' school where I discovered there's only a certain kind of language that some people understand. And I was pretty good at it. But when I went to reform school, I came into contact with female energy and discovered that violence was not the way. Breaking someone's face was not the way. I was involved in kind of gangs for a while. And can I tell you, if people are not too shocked, is that okay? I was an expert at breaking people's teeth.
Right.
So I wrote, I'm planning to write some kind of memoir, and I wrote to my editor several years ago, and I explained this. And she got very excited and said, oh, you must write about it in the greatest detail, like J.G. Ballard or someone. Yeah. Okay? But yes, so when I was with women a lot, I realized that machismo of a certain kind was not really attractive. I could do many things. I could sing. I'm a jazz singer. I could play guitar, and I could recite poetry, and I wrote poetry and things like that. And that pulled me away from this world, and pulled me away, of course, from looking at people like Ali, looking at what sport and what is actually very, and Ali is very feminine, yeah, actually. Yeah. Ali's a masculine boxer is Foreman. Ali is a ballerina. It's very beautiful. Maradona is a ballerina. Yeah. So the prospect of this body, essentially to take on very feminine qualities, something that was accentuated when I did a lot of work in shadow puppetry. And I spoke to and I had long conversations with my adoptive father, who is a great shadow puppeteer and ritual shadow puppeteer. And I asked him, what makes a good shadow puppeteer? And he said, the shadow puppeteer who can command female characters. Because the point of art is always to get yourself complete, which means to touch the feminine side of your character and personality. So even as I write about all this, I think there's a lot of this that I want to touch.
Yeah.
My interest, basically, I think, being a mixed child, a bastard child, because that's what I was called when I was growing up, that you were a bastard, a pariah. And like James Baldwin, I think you need to appropriate this. And it's a word I've come to really like. And when I write about lots of other things, I've discovered that there are lots of shortcomings with our terminology. Multiculturalism, pluralism. These are Western experiences, right? They're not our experiences. Our experiences are really bastard experiences. It really literally is colliding with one another. It's mongrelized, it's polyglot, it's, nothing so neat and categorized. It's not a word I can use in great writing, but I'm going to try and evolve that idea of bastardy essentially as a reflection of our beautiful cultural chaos. And so I've had to venture in all these things. And another thing is, I want to write about my region, and I want to write about my country, and I want to write about the great cultural mess that are ocean societies, that are diasporic societies. I don't want to write like an academic, and I think a lot of academic work is very good, but I'm kind of very tired that a lot of Southeast Asia is only known academically, or in UN terms and things. And so I've tried to grasp at just about everything that has passed through, including our connections, which extends all the way, of course, to colonialism, which I embrace very deeply. Yeah, a lot of the writers that I grew up with are colonial writers, and I think Bilal and I are going to speak about that tomorrow. But also, Indian Ocean communities and much further.
Well, I'd like to thank you so much, Eddin. That was absolutely fascinating. I'd like to thank everyone who's participated today. I loved your personal recollections just now. It's just given me a totally different perspective on how you see the world as well.